Welcome to Football Game Plan's FCS Kickoff, presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook, and welcome to this quarterfinals preview of the FCS. Like I mentioned in the open, we've reached the quarterfinals of the FCS playoffs, but here's what we have on tap for this episode. We're going to preview all of the games on this week's schedule in the FCS. We're also going to have our FCS correspondents whip you around the FCS and those conferences that still have participants in the FCS playoffs. And as always, we'll take a look at some of the key NFL draft prospects you want to keep an eye on in this upcoming week's slate of games. But first, let's dive into our 4-minute offense to take a look at some of the top storylines heading into week 15 of the FCS.
As the coaching carousel continues in the FCS, we'll continue to follow them as they happen. And Frank Tavani, a longtime Lafayette Leopards coach, retired this past week after 17 seasons at the helm. And Tavani compiled an 84-107 record with 4 conference titles and 4 FCS playoff appearances. I personally think that this is a sleeping giant program that is heading in the right direction, and whoever takes over in 2017 will have a lot to work with moving forward. The Celebration Bowl is now set. Grambling State will take on North Carolina Central on December the 17th at the Georgia Dome on ABC in the second annual Air Force Reserve Celebration Bowl. The Tigers were able to punch their ticket last week after a thrilling comeback victory over Alcorn State, and North Carolina Central was just sitting back relaxing as they locked up their bid 2 weeks ago after knocking off North Carolina A&T. This should be a great game between two outstanding HBCU programs. The FCS Bowl took place last weekend and was a huge success. Hundreds of prospects traveled down to Daytona Beach, Florida to participate in a 3-day event which included workouts and testing from NFL, CFL, arena football, and also international scouts, and a game on December the 4th. Now in that game, Southern Illinois quarterback Josh Strahan captured the MVP award after tossing 3 touchdown passes. And if you missed this game or want to see it again, visit the website www.fcsbowl.com. And finally, speaking of all-star games, some of the invites to the 2017 Reese's Senior Bowl are starting to trickle out, and obviously we're an FCS show, so we'll take a look at some of the players from the football championship subdivision that will be participating in the game in late January. You look at 2 Tennessee State Tigers and Jessamine Dunker and Ezra Robinson, both outstanding players. Chattanooga gets their defensive end Keonta Davis in the bowl game as well. Brendan Langley, a former Texas A&M transfer that's now at Lamar, that played exceptionally well down there for the Cardinals. Tana Passanio, we talked about him all season long for Villanova. Cooper Kupp, the outstanding all-everything wide receiver from Eastern Washington. And Bucknell's offensive tackle, Julian Davenport, also accepted his invite to the Senior Bowl. And not to leave out the other bowl games, look at the East-West Shrine game. Only 2 FCS accepted invites so far. Drake's tight end, Eric Saubert, is an outstanding option in the passing game. You look at the offensive lineman, Zach Johnson of North Dakota State as well. Tremendous talent, 2 outstanding players traveling down to St. Petersburg to play in that bowl game. Also, the NFLPA game has 3 guys as well. Wide receiver Chad Williams of Grambling State, Illinois State's offensive lineman Cameron Lee, and quarterback Brady Gustafson of Montana will find their way out west to Los Angeles to participate in the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl.
For the Missouri Valley Football Conference, I'm Brian Sullivan. What an exciting round 2 that saw all 3 teams move into the quarterfinals as Penguin Nation went into number 3 Jacksonville State and broke their 14th straight home game winning streak by destroying the Gamecocks 40-24. South Dakota State squeaked by Villanova 10-7, and North Dakota State took care of business against San Diego 45-7. Now let's take a look at round 3 by heading to Youngstown State, where Penguin Nation hosts Wofford. The Terriers bring in their tricky wing-bone offense that causes trouble for any defense, led by quarterback Brandon Goodson, who may not play due to injury. If he can't go, true freshman Joe Newman, who came in last week to win the game, will start. They face a mean, scary Penguin Nation defense that has been dominant all year, led by NFL-ready defensive end Derek Rivers and his partner in crime defensive end Avery Moss, and an experienced secondary. The Penguin Nation defense is built to handle the wing-bone offense, as Moss and Rivers will cause havoc on each side of the field, especially since Wofford's top offensive lineman, Anton Warbury, is out, leaving the linebackers free to make plays. On the flip side, the Penguin Nation offense has found their stride by scoring 78 points in the last 2 playoff games, but they will need to keep up that offensive momentum as they face a Wofford defense that has given up an average of less than 6 points per game in the last 3 games. Penguin Nation will continue to count on running backs Jody Webb and Martin Ruiz to keep their running wild, as the Terriers have yet to give up a 100-yard rusher this year. My prediction is Youngstown State will win their 16th straight home playoff game, 21-10. And finally, in a rematch of co-conference champ, South Dakota State travels with North Dakota State in a game which promises to be a battle, dogfight, and slobber knocker. The Jackrabbits are responsible for the Bison only loss this season, as wide receiver Jake Winicky caught a touchdown pass with a second to go in a 19-7 victory, which the Bison have not forgotten. Beating the Bison 2 in a row in the Fargo Dome will be a huge task, but they have the offense to do it, led by Conference Offensive Player of the Year Tyron Christian, who was a dual threat with his arm and legs, and his 2 favorite targets, tight end Dallas Goedert, who caught a huge pass to set up the game-winning score last week, and NFL-ready wide receiver Jake Winicky. The Bison will have revenge on their mind, not only for losing with a second to go, but for also Jackrabbits linebacker Christian Rosenboom's dirty hit on Bison running back Bruce Anderson, which caused him to miss most of the regular season. The Bison defense, which has gotten better since the heart and soul Nick DeLuca went out for the year, will use Villanova's blueprint on how to contain the Jackrabbits' potent offense. The Bison offense is in full stride after putting up 45 points against a San Diego team that was number 1 in scoring defense, with giving up 12.9 points per game, led by Easton Stick, who had 3 touchdown passes and 99 yards rushing, running back Lance Dunn, who rushed for 93 yards, and running back King Frazier. And make no mistake, running back Bruce Anderson will look for a little revenge against linebacker Rosenboom. A win by South Dakota State would show that they have taken over North Dakota State as the team to beat in the conference. My prediction is the Bison avenge their loss and improve to 18-0 at home in the playoffs by winning 31-21.
And then there were 2. After an amazing weekend of FCS playoff action, only 2 CAA teams remain in the hunt for the national championship. The University of New Hampshire was blown out, and Villanova lost by 3 in heartbreaking fashion. That leaves us with the Richmond Spiders and the CAA champion James Madison Dukes. In the quarterfinals, the Richmond Spiders will be traveling cross-country to take on the Big Sky champion Eastern Washington Eagles. The Eagles are the 2 seed and are coming off of a 31-14 beatdown of Central Arkansas. I wouldn't count out Richmond just yet, though. They are coming off of a thrilling win where they scored 20 unanswered points and won 27-24 over North Dakota. Senior wide receiver Brian Brown hauled in 6 catches for 171 yards and 2 touchdowns. His quarterback, sophomore Kevin Johnson, threw for 260 yards and 2 touchdowns. This will be Richmond's toughest task to date, though. They have been able to continue offensive dominance without their star quarterback, Kyle Lauletta. Will they be able to keep that up this Saturday? The James Madison Dukes will be taking on the Southland champion Sam Houston State Bearcats this Friday night. The undefeated Bearcats are coming off of a 41-36 shootout with Chattanooga. They will face a much tougher opponent this week in the JMU Dukes. James Madison bullied New Hampshire. They won by a score of 55-22 in the much-anticipated return of the CAA Offensive Player of the Year, junior quarterback Brian Shore. Shore threw for 371 yards and a school record-tying 5 touchdowns. Both Brandon Revenell and Terrence Alls eclipsed the century mark in receiving yards as well. Their defense was able to hold New Hampshire to only 268 total yards of offense after they went off for nearly 700 a week prior. Even though this is JMU's toughest FCS opponent of the season, with Short back at quarterback, this offense is capable of anything. As long as their defense can play tough, I believe they have a good chance of advancing to the semifinals. Good luck to the Spiders and the Dukes this weekend.
Welcome to the Big Sky. I'm Anthony Crescenzo. Eastern Washington has made it to the FCS quarterfinals, where they will host Richmond in the Inferno. This will be the second week in a row for a Big Sky Colonial matchup. Last week, it was the Spiders at North Dakota. Eastern is 2-1 against the Colonial Athletic Association as they beat Villanova in Delaware. Eagles quarterback Gage Gubrud set a school record for completions this week, going 47 for 64 with 449 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Walter Payton Award finalist also rushed for 68 yards and a score. All-American, NFL ready, and another Walter Payton Award finalist, wide receiver Cooper Kupp, caught 2 touchdowns while continuing to play with his shoulder injury. Shaq Hill sealed the deal for the Big Sky co-conference champions, and Kendrick Bourne led all receivers with 13 catches for 112 yards. Now, Richmond held North Dakota to 295 yards, and like the Eagles, they have playoff experience. This is their 3rd consecutive year in the postseason, and the team they just bested was 9-2 with an undefeated conference season, and they were the other half of the Big Sky championship equation. The turning point in the Spiders Fighting Hawks game was a roughing the kicker penalty against UND on 4th and 1 from Richmond's 17-yard line. It was a relatively early penalty, but it kept the Spiders' drive alive and eventually led to the 20-point run, which culminated with Trow's second good field goal of the game, this one with no time remaining. One thing the Eagles can take from this is that Richmond only had 2 sacks against Keaton Strudrud, while Kevin Johnson was sacked 4 times. And more importantly, the Spiders only picked up 2 penalties in the game. The Eagles are going to have to keep the penalties to a minimum. Richmond's Kevin Johnson went 15 for 22 for 289 yards, 2 touchdowns, connecting for points with Brian Brown and Garrett Hudson. Johnson also rushed 1 in. Richmond's Kevin Johnson went 15 for 22 for 289 yards, 2 touchdowns, connecting for points with Brian Brown and Garrett Hudson. Johnson also rushed 1 in. Will the Eags make it to the semis? We'll find out this week. For the Big Sky, I'm Anthony Crescenzo.
New York City is the largest market for broadcast media. It's the epicenter for the TV and radio industry. If you ever had a dream of working in the thrilling broadcast world, then make it a reality by going to the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. CSB has helped numerous people get a job with hands-on training and a learn-by-doing mentality. You will learn all of the high-tech equipment in the TV and radio studios. From hosting your own radio show, to being a news or sports anchor, operating a camera in the TV studio, or editing audio and video, the choice is yours. Graduates from CSB have gone on to work at some of the major companies in the industry. To get more information, call 1-800-TV-RADIO or check us out at gocsb.com. Your road to success starts here at the Connecticut School of Broadcasting.
Welcome back to the FCS Kickoff presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook, and let's take a look at some of the NFL draft prospects you want to keep an eye on in this week's slate of playoff games.
Although he's a junior, keep an eye on Jake Wieneke of South Dakota State. You talk about Cooper Kupp and what he's done this season in the FCS. Jake Wieneke is right there for the South Dakota State Jackrabbits at 6'4", 215. He's a guy that has that versatility that can play outside or inside. And as you saw in these highlights, he's a guy that can also not only make a big play deep down the field, as you see here versus North Dakota State, but a guy that can take a short pass a long way. So if he's having a big day for the Jackrabbits, that means that they are having a big day offensively against North Dakota State. So he's a guy that has a great chance to raise his stock for next season in this ball game versus the Bison. Another guy to keep an eye on is Lorenzo Long, the fullback out of Wofford at 5'9", 205. In that B-back position in that triple option attack, he's a tremendous talent. I saw him last week versus the Citadel, and he had a huge game amongst other huge games he's had all season long. He has over 1,000 yards rushing, and teams know he's getting the football. And again, if he's having a big day, that means that the Wofford Terriers are having a big day as well against Youngstown State. So he's a guy that I think when you look at him from a pro perspective, you see a player that can run tough inside, that does a great job in breaking tackles, and that's what you're getting from an option tailback or an option fullback. So I'm interested to see how he does this week versus a very good defense in Youngstown State.
Now it's time to preview the quarterfinals of the FCS playoffs, and we're going to start with the Friday matchup between Sam Houston State and James Madison.
This will be a damn good game between two outstanding programs. Starting with James Madison in this one, I think the fact that Brian Shore is back and healthy in the fold gives them a great chance in this contest. He's the straw that stirs this drink for this offense. Now, the Dukes will need to be balanced and control the clock in this game. In addition to what they do with the ball offensively, controlling the TOP helps increase their chances of winning. Now, that is not to say that Sam Houston State needs a lot of time on the clock to score, because they obviously don't. Their offense is the best in the FCS, and that goes without saying. So I'll focus on the defensive side of the ball and look to their defensive line led by P.J. Hall as the biggest X factor in this game. The goal is to take away Khalid Abdullah and make sure beats you consistently from the pocket. Look for a great back and forth struggle down in Huntsville, Texas, with the Bearcats being able to win this one with defense over James Madison. Richmond travels to Cheney, Washington to take on the Eastern Washington Eagles, and the Spiders have played some inspired football in these playoffs considering the injuries that they've had coming into them. Now, head coach Danny Rocco isn't the one to make excuses, but being without a lot of starters does take a toll on your squad eventually. Now, the guys have responded with the next man up mentality very well and have won back-to-back games. Their pass defense will be put to the test against the Red Hot Eagles, who boast arguably the best passing game in the FCS, led by wide receiver Cooper Kupp. Now, last week the Eagles showed some stout defense as well in limiting Central Arkansas to only 14 points. I like Eastern in this game. The Spiders will be a game opponent, but the constant and downward pressure the Eagles' passing game presents itself will be too much for a weakened secondary to overcome. Look for Eastern Washington to move on to the next round. We have a styles make fights reference here as Wofford takes on Youngstown State, and we've seen this Terriers team offensively be able to rev up when they had to and also close out games when they have had to as well. But the bigger story, in my opinion, has been their play defensively. I think Wofford has been as fundamentally sound defensively as any defense in the FCS. This one will ultimately come down to third down defense. Wofford does a great job there, while Youngstown State has shown a propensity to struggle there offensively. Now, where the Penguins dominate is along the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Youngstown State is able to lean on opposing defenses with their big offensive line and also have two tremendous edge rushers in Avery Moss and Derek Rivers. Now, the triple option does a great job of neutralizing those edge rushers, so the Penguins will need for both Moss and Rivers to be great run defenders in this game if they want to win. I think both guys will be up to the task, as well as both safeties Jamil Smith and also Leroy Alexander. Look for the Penguins to win a close one versus Wofford. It's the Dakota marker game playoff style as South Dakota State and North Dakota State meet up in a rematch from earlier in the season. That was a game in which the Jackrabbits won on the last play of the game. Now, the win obviously gives South Dakota State a ton of confidence heading into this one. For me, this game will have to be won in the trenches. That's where North Dakota State is dominant on both sides of the ball. And if the Jackrabbits can't disrupt the pocket, keep the Bison offensive line from getting to the second level, then they could struggle in the Fargo Dome. Now, for North Dakota State, I think they have to find a way to get off to a great start offensively. At times, the Bison can start slowly in ball games, which put them in an early hole. Last meeting, they got off to a great start, but slowly took their foot off the gas, which allowed the Jackrabbits to come back and ultimately win the game. I don't think that'll happen again. I like North Dakota State in this one. Look for a much better contained defense from the Bison the second time around, which will take away that explosive element of quarterback Taron Christian's game en route to a victory.
So that's it for this week's episode of the FCS Kickoff presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts and also check out and subscribe to our FCS Opening Drive podcast on iTunes.